Welcome to First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Shirley Min and Mark Eichman. Wilmington's mayor answers critics to his crime-fighting plan and promises community support will help produce results.
The man behind breaking Chile's largest church sex abuse scandal is now a DuPont executive. We'll meet him and hear his story this week on First.
And Mark, also this week, Jamie Wyeth talks to us and shares some thoughts behind some of his famous works now on display to the public. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
Wilmington Mayor Dennis Williams is fired up. He's as tired as any resident over the number of murders and shootings in the city. First Look reports on the mayor's new plan. It's a plan that he believes can attack the city's crime hotspots. He also answers critics who believe he isn't doing enough, including one critic who says we should call out the National Guard.
My baby gone. He's gone.
The recent wave of shooting violence in the city of Wilmington seems like it picked up right where 2014 ended, and people touched by some of the violence feel like they have the answer.
Bring the jump out squads back around, you know. Start posting up on these places where they hang at. We know where they hang at. You know where they hang at. Be there.
I think this is crazy. I think we're at war, and since we're at war, the mayor and the governor ought to respond like it's war. We'll put feet on the street. If need be, bring the National Guard in.
The city has been open to many things, but bringing in the National Guard is not an option.
If you don't call the police when you see a crime, you're part of the problem. If you don't sweep in front of your house, you're part of the problem. The National Guard. Really.
The idea of the National Guard hits close to home to the mayor and many residents. The Guards patrolled Wilmington in the wake of the 1968 assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.
I lived under the National Guard for 2 years. It was the worst time of my life as a child growing up in this city. And many baby boomers like myself would be so disgusted with the National Guard roaming our streets again.
Although there have been multiple shootings, including 2 separate triple shooting incidents in January, Mayor Williams and Police Chief Bobby Cummings have assigned more police officers to the streets under Operation Disrupt. Police are also enforcing the weekly curfew.
It's to the point right now where they shoot people in broad daylight. So the idea of a curfew, what's the curfew going to be? 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock? Young boy got shot at 4 o'clock. So that curfew won't work.
First of all, the police can't raise your children. That's number one. The police can't turn around and say, you know, here's what we're going to do and it's going to be a cure-all. Government can't come in and raise your children. It takes everybody at the police at the table. Parents need to understand that some of their kids are out there. They're involved in this. They need to tell us.
Some city residents are echoing the same message.
If you want this to stop, the people in the community, you have to start working with the police officers. The police officers also have to start working with the community, too.
That's ultimately the goal that Mayor Williams has talked about. It's called community policing, and according to him, it's a proven method that works only if people cooperate.
If you took a map and you looked at the crime, there's certain areas where crime is, and there's several areas of the city where crime is not. And let me tell you why crime is not in those areas. Because those people call the police, and they tell if anybody comes in their neighborhood doing anything wrong.
You punks, you cowards with guns. Come on. Okay? That's what you are.
But as emotions run high among some communities, especially for Hawkins, who lost his second grandson to violence within a short period, time will only tell what 2015 truly holds.
This one here is personal to me. Am I angry? Yes, I'm angry because this is my grandson. So this is real personal to me.
If we don't hurry up and do something, it's going to be a lot more of this taking place. And we need to get on it. When I say we, I'm talking everybody.
For the mayor and police, that means no more silence when it comes to violence.
It's a very small percentage of people causing this problem. And a lot of people know who's causing this problem.
When initiatives fail to tackle crime, the mayor says he's quick to revisit and create new strategies, like Operation Disrupt, for an example, redeploying nearly 30 police officers to some of the city's crime-infested areas. It's part of a 3-phase initiative introduced due to the recent wave of gun violence this year.
Nichelle, what are some of the other initiatives that the mayor has tested out?
Some of the initiatives include the expansion of some parks and recreation programs to pretty much give young people something to do. Last year, the city teamed up with health and law enforcement professionals as well, who are treating crime here as a health problem. So going into hospitals and meeting with shooting victims to encourage them to change their ways or talk them out of retaliating under the Cease Violence program. That's one. And so there are a number of things in place to actually produce some positive results for the city.
Here in the newsroom, we keep getting these releases about another shooting in the city of Wilmington. Is the community policing model working?
Yes, according to the mayor, it's definitely working, even though the city is well past a dozen shootings so far this year. Community policing is surely working out slowly but surely. In fact, the mayor said to me that the community policing is working so much so they solved a recent crime, a shooting crime actually, due to community input.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nichelle. To get another glimpse of Nichelle's story, be sure to visit us online at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, the works of Jamie Wyeth are on display at the Brandywine River Museum. We'll hear what he thinks about his creative process. And later, Deborah Appleby creates some finely crafted glassworks. How she found her calling is part of our First experience.
This fall, Pope Francis will attend the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia. The worldwide church sex abuse scandal isn't on the agenda, but it is still on many people's minds. It's certainly on the mind of a DuPont company executive who immigrated from Chile and knows firsthand what that scandal means. His story is our content partner story with Delaware Today magazine. This is the El Bosque parish in Chile, a place Juan Carlos Cruz attended seminary to become a priest, until he started to be abused at the hands of highly respected priest Father Fernando Caradima. It all started for Cruz after the death of his father.
From the minute he talked to me, he told me, Juan Carlos, you are blessed. The Lord has done something great with you. He has brought you to me. I'm going to be your father. I'm going to replace your father. So I was going to confession, and suddenly he started touching me, and all went downhill from there. I was paralyzed. Shame to say that it went on for 8 years, and it produces me a lot of shame and embarrassment.
Once Cruz finally escaped Caradima and the church, he tried to tuck away his pain and move on with life.
For some people it works, for others it just eats you up. And so I've had friends that have died, have committed suicide. And for me that's I think what made me come out and speak out about this.
Cruz joined 2 other victims to publicly accuse Caradima of abuse and other church leaders of covering it up. A criminal investigation confirmed their accusations, but the statute of limitations had expired. Now, a civil lawsuit against the Archdiocese starts in March. The Vatican has sentenced Caradima to a life of prayer and penitence, which Cruz says is not a just punishment.
He's living in a convent. We say he's like an all-inclusive because he's being treated really well. He's not in the parish, or he cannot have contact with people, so that's a big triumph. But he never paid, really, for what he had done.
Cruz has received lots of support in Chile, even from Chilean President Michelle Bachelet, who connected with Cruz during a January visit to the Port of Wilmington.
As soon as she arrived in the Port of Wilmington and she came, there was a lot of people, and she came to see some workers that were Chilean workers, and I was standing with them. And then she said hello to them in Spanish, and then she saw me and she said, Juan Carlos, I can't believe it. And she gave me a big hug and a kiss. It really means a lot because, wow, how the tides have turned, when we were these scared men talking about sexual abuse, and now we can help others by speaking out.
He's also written a book about his experience and started a foundation to help other victims.
And I know too many people who have died not trying. And it breaks my heart. And it makes me cry every time I think of them, because some were my friends. And, I don't want anybody to have to go through that.
The story of priest abuse in Chile is now being made into a film. You saw some of the scenes there in the beginning of our piece. Cruz says he was thrilled when Pope Francis, a fellow South American, became Pope, but he's been disappointed by some of his actions, including naming some of the Chilean church leaders who covered up his abuse to high positions in the Vatican. Cruz's book is now in its third printing in Spanish and will soon be published in English. You can read more about Cruz's story of overcoming abuse in this month's Delaware Today magazine or at delawaretoday.com.
We reported a few weeks ago here on First about the Jamie Wyeth retrospective on display at the Brandywine River Museum. The normally reclusive Wyeth has been doing interviews for this event, and I had the chance to sit down with him days after the show's opening. In our first-person interview, to start, I asked Wyeth why he finds exhibitions like this discomforting.
Well, it's your whole life in front of you. I mean, this is 40, 50 years of my work, and each painting at the time was an obsession. And I look back at them now objectively, and I wonder, why was I so obsessed with that or this? And then the sort of inadequacies of the paintings jump out at me mostly. I always say to writer friends of mine, it's as if you're in a room full of people reading your new novel, and you feel kind of like a jackass.
You know, let's pick a painting, for example, Greed. What inadequacies do you see in that?
Well, why popcorn and why that composition? You know, I mean, just things that I want. And I'd never go back to paintings once you reach a point of diminishing return, and then I just say enough and then walk out. So when I see them later, I think, why did I do that? You know, or why this line and so forth.
Can you point to a painting and say, I was obsessed with this at the time?
Well, the ones we're sitting among right now, the 7 Deadly Sins, that came from, I don't know where it came from, but I had a dream, and I woke up in the middle of the night and grabbed, I always have a pad near me, and did these sort of hieroglyphics. And the next morning I woke up, and here were all these things scattered around my bed, and I thought, what the hell's this? And then I looked at them, and then I started realizing, oh my God, yes, I dreamed about the 7 Deadly Sins. And then that became a year's obsession. I mean, that's all I did. When you see a group such as this body work together, you can see a real strain, a change and an evolution. But I try to stay away from sort of saying, well, is this a good direction or is this a good direction? Better to just keep working. And, you know, a lot of my work is not inspired, and I think, but particularly as a painter, I mean, it's a discipline where it's just you. I mean, there's nobody saying, there's no crew there with cameras, there's no musicians and whatnot. And you have to push yourself. The opiate of painting to me is when things finally click, when all of a sudden the gulls become alive or Kennedy becomes alive and so forth. That's the opiate, but a lot of it's drudgery and just pushing yourself every day.
When you say your work is uninspired, meaning you don't see something and then you think, well, I need to draw that? Does it usually come to you in dream form or? In
many forms, but I don't leap out of bed every morning and say, I can't wait till I paint. A lot of times I really have to push myself.
So what's a typical day in the life of Jamie Wyeth like?
Getting up very early. I'm up way before dawn, walk for about an hour and a half, and then go to my studio. So it's pretty boring to most people.
You know, I think there are a lot of people who would try to describe your style. In your words, how would you describe your artistic style, painting style? Is there a word for it?
I don't know. It's very eclectic, I must say, particularly when I see this retrospective. In some ways, I feel it looks like a bunch of different painters, which may be good in a sense, because I think I'm unconsciously experimenting. And I mean, I can see it when I work. At one point, I didn't want things to dry. And so through a house painter friend of mine, he told me about oil of clothes. Well, I put that with a paint, and those paintings still aren't dry. I mean, those are 5 years old. And then I went through a period where I wanted them to dry quickly, and I stuck them in ovens, and they burned up and so forth. So I'm always trying different things. I mean, that's the interesting thing about painting, that discipline, and that you can experiment. There's nobody there saying, don't do this, try this, and you need to push the borders and whatnot, but it's not always inspired.
Your recurring dreams series where you have grandfather N.C. Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth, overlooking the coast of Maine. Do you paint things with a meaning in mind?
My vocabulary is paint. And so once that painting leaves my easel or studio, I feel it has its life of its own, and I'm not going to impose on people by saying, oh no, that's the wrong interpretation. I mean, everybody, and sometimes they're very sort of close to what I was saying, but I just remain silent about it.
Critics have been kind, not so kind to your family, to you as well. Do you pay any attention to that? Did your father, Andrew Wyeth, pay any attention to the critical reviews?
No, I mean, obviously it's upsetting when you have a show and everybody blasts it and so forth, but at least, you know, they're not ignoring you. And I find painting very difficult, and so from a child up to now, all those considerations kind of stay outside of my studio door, because I have enough problems just painting. And, you know, that's sort of secondary. And of course, the irony with criticism in the discipline of painting is it has virtually no effect. I mean, they can shut a play down, they can shut a film down, when it has no effect on painting.
Is it nice to have this sort of exhibition in your hometown?
It's kind of, I mean, there are an awful lot of ghosts running around this building for me. I mean, not just my father, but Howard Pyle, Jimmy Lynch, and also it's very moving. I mean, this obviously is my hometown, and so, yes, it means a lot more to me than the other venues.
Are you surprised by how much you've done? 6 decades of work is a long time, but are you surprised at your output?
This is just a fraction of what I've done. I mean, a lot of stuff I destroy, and then a lot of stuff I just put in drawers and so forth. So you're seeing really a small part of it.
But is it surreal to be sitting among all of your work?
It's very odd. I feel dead. You know, I mean, most museums are full of dead painters. I mean, they're painters you know, obviously I think I'm still alive, and so yes, that is sort of odd to have a retrospective.
Okay, well, Jamie Wyeth, thank you so much for your time, and again, the Jamie Wyeth retrospective is going to be running through April 5th here at the Brandywine River Museum of Art.
First Online can be found at WHYY.org/first. This show and all of our shows are just a click away. Sign up for our e-newsletter, and you'll be the first to know what's coming up on the show and what WHYY is doing in Delaware.
First headlines this week, the new DelDOT Secretary, Jennifer Cohan, was sworn in this week. Governor Jack Markell did the honors with some help from Cohan's husband and daughter. The 42-year-old says she's going to focus on innovation as a way to bring down costs and increase efficiencies. She also says something needs to be done to secure the Transportation Trust Fund, including bringing up the gas tax option once again this legislative session.
I would not rule gas tax out. I mean, it is one of the primary, contributors to the Transportation Trust Fund. But there are other things. There are DMV fees that we can look at. And then there's actually, I've been getting a lot of really creative ideas from both legislators and members of the general public that are worth exploring as well.
Many of the state lawmakers who would have to vote on a gas tax were in attendance to watch Cohan swearing in. In a couple of weeks, she'll appear before a joint finance committee where she'll outline her budget requests. For Delaware News anytime, go to newsworks.org/Delaware. For Delaware News on the radio, go to WHYY-FM 90.9.
Dace Blaskovitz is a familiar face to many WHYY viewers. He's back with a series of business interviews. This week, Dace sits down with Ron Morris, former finance director of both Newcastle County and the city of Wilmington. Here is Dace on business.
I'll call it collectively for maybe 50 years, you're now retired, but for roughly half a century, you oversaw the financial statements, oversaw or overlooked the financial statements of both the city of Wilmington and Newcastle County. As we sit here in early February 2015, what kind of shape is the city of Wilmington in?
Well, let me start out saying I am a lifelong resident of the city. I'm an advocate for the city. And looking at the city's own numbers in their October 14 forecast through 2019, cities showing that expenditures are slightly outpacing revenue. However, when you look at the actuals for the last 2 years, the numbers tell you a little different story, kind of a tale of two cities. The forecast, the projection is much brighter than what's actually going on in the past 2 years, where revenue growth has actually declined and expenditure growth has moved at a little over 6%. In the forecast, the city is pretty much relying on its wage tax with a cumulative growth of about 17% through 15 through 2019. And interestingly enough, the property tax, which has increased this year 5%, is showing a decline for the past 2 years. Less revenues collected, and even through 19, the amount that they're projecting to be collected will only equal the amount that was actually collected in 2012.
Property tax and wage tax, if I remember, make up something like 2/3 of the annual budget, annual revenues, if you will. When you look at those two key ingredients, any trends, any assessment that you can see from them?
Well, clearly with the property tax, the trend is not a good trend. Since 2012, the numbers have declined. And as I said, with a 5% increase in the property tax rate, taxpayers are going to be paying more, but the city is going to be collecting less, which tells you there is a fundamental structural problem there that needs to be researched, investigated, and dealt with quickly. That primarily is due to the loss of assessments and somewhat collections. On the wage tax by its nature is somewhat unstable, so we have an unstable revenue source in an unstable environment. The two are not healthy.
Back in the 1990s, the city of Wilmington, if I remember correctly, had responsibilities at both the court and also the port. Fast forward, and I believe the city of Wilmington actually has more employees now without those responsibilities. Therefore, the question to Ron Morris is the financial difficulties of the city of Wilmington correlate to simply bloated government?
Well, some may say it's bloated, but it does correlate with personnel costs. 2/3 of that, maybe closer to 3/4 of it being personnel costs in the annual operating budget, excluding the sewer fund. And of course, we all know the cost of health care, the cost of prescription medication, workers' comp is increasing. Personnel has increased. It's true it has increased, but it's interesting that the increase since 1996 has been a little over 100 positions. Most of those have gone to police, but in a strange situation, the mayor's office, which had about 16 positions in 1996, now shows 60.
You said all along the city has to return to its core mission. Explain that.
Absolutely. I believe the city needs to rethink what it's doing. Going back to the beginning of the city, how it was created, why it was created, and these services was primarily to protect its residents, both their public safety and their public health.
The mayor has a budget address here somewhere shortly. Any predictions?
The real prediction will be what's going to happen with public safety in the city of Wilmington. You can't talk about dollars and public safety in the same breath. You need to deal with the problem, decrease the violence, decrease the murders, and take us off the national murder city list.
Ron Morris, thank you.
Thank you, Dace.
Crunch time for both the city of Wilmington and Newcastle County comes towards the end of March. Both Tom Gordon and Dennis Williams present their budgets to their respective legislative bodies. That's when they'll list their priorities for spending and how they're going to pay for it.
Deborah Appleby used to own a men's clothing shop in Lewis. She knew that once the Rehoboth outlet stores began that she needed a change of careers. She took a class on glass blowing and was hooked. After several apprenticeships in Europe and Seattle, she settled back home in Lewis. First Experience shows you Appleby's craft, her style, and what goes into it.
I am a Delaware native, and I've had the shop here since '99. I've been blowing glass for 22 years. I am predominantly a production glass blower, making traditional functional pieces, and that's the basis of my work. I had a men's clothing store and a men's business clothing line, t-shirt, jewelry, and I knew that it was in town and the outlets were coming, they weren't here yet. And we went from having 3 men's stores to having almost 15 men's stores. And I was on a buying trip in New York, and I saw this ad for a glassblowing weekend at Urban. And I went, and I was like, that's it. Each idea in each piece comes from something that I've either had inspiration from outside of my environment, I've been doing a lot of colors with the ocean, of course, and that kind of thing. Is it something that hopefully will stand the test of time, that you will love and pass down to your children? That's more where I come from. I never looked at things as artistic. I was never going to be a sculptor. I was never going to be a goblet maker. But I wanted to make well-crafted pieces that were pleasing to the eye as well as functional. I'm a craftsperson, and I think about the functionality of, will the colors work with the piece? Does the neck flow with this? I'm more about structure and about, is the lip going to balance with the base? It's more that's my dialogue. There are days where I'm really happy. I am happy to come on and the pieces work out and is well crafted and beautiful. And there are days I hate it, like, really? Another spin bowl in the process of how many spin bowls, of how many days of spin bowls? But every day can't be perfect. I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing. And I've been grateful for doing what I'm doing, and I have the work, but it's not flowing out of me like artists, I hate to say. It is from here, through here, and it comes out here, and it is a piece of me. But there's something about that making with the hands. You know, there's some days where, especially when we're making some of the bigger pieces, or we're in a production, there's 13 of us working, and there is this joy, it's this energy that flows. That camaraderie, that joy, that energy, and that we're all coming together and making a finished piece, and we're happy and proud. We're proud of that piece. So that's kind of what gets me up in the morning, and I'm happy when these pieces leave, that hopefully someone will really enjoy it and that they'll pass it on.
The bowls Appleby was working on during our story were recently given as gifts during a government energy summit. You can see more of Deborah Appleby's work as well as make an appointment to stop by when you visit her website, thestudio124.com.
And next week, a change at Habitat for Humanity of Newcastle County produces a change in the way that some of their homes are built. Efficiency is the obvious difference, but we'll explore what else went into the move. And we'll take a sneak peek at the PBS documentary on Italian Americans.
We're going to leave you this week with some video shot by the friends of first photographer Paul Parmalee. He was part of the polar bear plunge in Rehoboth last Sunday, his 12th plunge. That is first for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston, I'm Mark Eichman. Have a great week.